Wolfman Grim Reaper. Today marks a pretty big day for a true believer like me. That today is November 12th, 2020, 2-year anniversary of Stan Lee's death. Marvel Comics creator, founder, and big time figurehead of the company, Stan Lee. He was born in 1922, and for the last 30 years throughout our history, and a guy who created an era, created an era, and left a legacy, an irreplaceable legacy. And taking influence from Charles Dickens, Amy Zola, and the Hardy Boys, he made superhero comics. Took the name of Timely Comics, rebranded it as Marvel, and created a big universe. He created a universe and left behind an irreplaceable legacy. And he made so much money, he made millions. And at the time of his death, he was estimated to be worth $50 million. And for a guy who said, he was born Stanley Martin Lieber, and he said, I'm not going to use my real name for these silly comic books, as he said. So I split my real name as Stan Lee Lieber, choosing to save it for posterity. What I did was I took my name, Stanley, and split it up to two syllables, as Stan and Lee, and making a new name and saving his birth name of Stan Lieber for posterity. He was born in 1922, and he grew up during times of the Great Depression in New York, but yet working part-time jobs. And it wasn't long until when he was finding himself becoming the youngest editor, even if he worked mundane tasks like taking out trash and filling inkwells, he still was working for a comic brand. And he even also thought about the idea of going ahead and publishing a character for, I think it was Amazing Fantasy, but he made a well-selling character in SpiderMan. People thought, you can't call a character Spider-Man. People do not like spiders. But he made him as a teenage superhero who took the lead and was one with flawed humanity. And it was like, do you know what superheroes are? But he wanted to make superheroes naturalized and realistic, rather than just someone in his eyes was someone who could just come in, fight a group of bad guys who just come in, fight bad guys with a cool super suit on. He wanted some more than just, he wanted a flawed humanity kind of character. And he wanted to make the everyman kind of character in ways when you viewed the character, you were able to relate to the character. Like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. Oz is what he wanted. He wanted that whole deal, the same way you could see the everyman characters like the Hardy Boys, like the works of Charles Dickens, Amy Zola, like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. He wanted those everyman characters. He made them and shaped a whole universe. And he made the biggest universe ever thought of, in even making cameos in movies, and doing so many cameos. And from the early beginning all the way, I think it was back in the year 2000, for the last 18 years, from 2000 to 2018, he made cameos. His Avengers and Ant-Man cameos were his last ones. And all future Marvel movies will never have him. It's kind of a bummer. But seeing the age of 95 years old like he did was amazing. If he were still alive today, he'd be 98, which would be pretty hard to believe, but if he was making a Marvel cameo, that would be great. Because he was seen as someone who was an editor and becoming the youngest editor. He even made different types of appearances where he said, "Hi, I am Stan Lee." In black and white, it was just cool stuff. He made a big brand, and he made a whole bunch of superheroes. But the one thing that was really amazing, other than just making superheroes, was him taking an old word, excelsior. He said it meant to be ever upward and to be ever onward and to reach a higher degree. And he took that word, he made it a catchphrase, and he made it so amazing. It was a big catchphrase of his. And he always said excelsior all the time. It was cool always hearing him say that. It didn't matter, even if you barely even knew him and were too young to understand who he was, you were in the presence of a guy who was a great creator. And he even admitted to having loved Cameos, and he made so much money from what he thought was silly. He had made characters. He made a big cinematic universe. Without him, the Marvel Cinematic Universe wouldn't be anything. The only way to make things seem like they didn't happen is to Back to the Future things and convince him to not do the things that he did, to not be working as a young editor and task taker for Timely Comics, and come up with the whole, and not even come up with the Marvel name, just to, I don't know what could have been done. The only way to act like this didn't, to make it seem like it didn't happen, was to Back to the Future everything. Back to the Future in a reality where Stan Lee, when it never existed, seems like a bad idea, and I would agree it is. But who would want to Back to the Future a thing like his? It's impossible to want to Back to the Future. Sometimes there are some things that should be Back to the Future, but Back to the Futuring Stan Lee, nah. He created a universe. Steve Jobs made Apple. Bill Gates made Microsoft. Ole Kirk Christensen, he created the Legos toy brand. But one thing that they did not create, that Stan created, was a universe. While Stan created a universe, he made a universe where Jobs, Gates, Christensen all say they created toys and electronics. They can't compare to the fact that Stan created a universe. He made the biggest one. He made the Marvel Universe. And he even took the word excelsior, made it his catchphrase. For the last 30 years, from having made Captain America in 1941, for those 70 years, from 1941 to November 12th, 2018, were the golden days of Marvel. And Marvel has lost its charm. This is 2 years that Marvel has been without its big golden charm. It's hard telling it how things are going to be come the upcoming 2020s movies in this current decade that we're living in right now, the 2020s decade, how we're going to be coming up, what the Marvel movies and the Marvel Universe is going to be like. It is hard telling what it's going to be like. It's hard telling because this is 2 years Marvel not being golden anymore. It was golden then, it's just no longer golden. The man, Stan, the man who created the universe, who went from a task picker to a big time editor, writer, and movie cameo actor, is gone. This is 2 years. Marvel has been without it now. This is 2 years of Stan's death. He was loved 3,000. But anyway, Wolfman, Grim Reaper, loved Stan Lee's work 3,000. Stan Lee, I'm a true believer for him. So Wolfman, Grim Reaper, true believer, loved everything 3,000. Excelsior.